On behalf of Pickens County Progress, I want to thank you all for coming tonight. I've said this at debates that I have moderated before. It always warms my heart to see people turn out for an event like this, see how civic-minded we are. We have a few open chairs, but not many. Wish we could have filled them up, but who knows? We might yet, you know. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Larry Cavender. I am the I hope Dan don't mind me saying this. I am the Ball Ground Bureau Chief and do a lot of articles for Ball Ground South Pickens as well as all over Pickens. And so I thought a few of you might wonder who I am. I'll be your moderator tonight. It's going to be basically in 3 segments. First, we're going to ask Mr. Steve Gooch to come up. He's unchallenged, but he's going to address the group. And then also after that, we'll have our first debate between Rick Jasperse and Lee Shiver. And then our third segment will be the debate between Mr. Morgan and Mr. Payne. I always like to do this before I start anything, whether I'm doing a speaking engagement or something like this. I always like to ask those in the audience who are veterans. If you're a veteran, please raise your hand so we can acknowledge you and thank you. Also, I wanted to remind the veterans, I have learned that not many veterans actually know this. I'm going to ask you to stand to pledge allegiance to the flag in a moment, but because of the Defense Authorization Act of 2008, the etiquette for saluting the flag has been changed. If you are a veteran, if you're active duty or a veteran and you're in civilian clothes, if you choose, instead of a hand over the heart, you can now salute the flag during the pledge and the national anthem in the traditional military manner. So if you choose to do so, you can do that. I'm surprised at how many veterans do not know that. If you will please stand, let's pledge allegiance to the flag and we'll get started. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank y'all. Okay, first up, we'll ask Mr. Gooch to come to address the group. He was gracious enough, even though he doesn't have to get out and work for votes.
Oh, I do too.
Larry? Larry,
Yes,
if I may mention one thing, let tell me where the facilities are at, in case anybody needs to get up and go. The restrooms are down the hall and on the right. It's right here at the end of the hallway.
Rob, did you do that?
Just
because
like-
I was about
I
to.
did that because Steve got it, so I'm
Just like John Fogerty said in that song, I see a bathroom on the right.
Tell Rob and I go way back. He just looks a lot older than me. It's good to be with y'all, and it is always good to pick on Rob Jones. He was the last sole commissioner here in Pickens County. I was the last sole commissioner in Lumpkin County, so we have a lot in common in that. I've been your state senator for 8 years now, and I always consider it an honor to represent you and be your voice in Atlanta. Now, there's probably different opinions in this room as to what we should be doing or shouldn't be doing, and so obviously we're not going to always please everybody all the time, but we do have a tough job. It's a part-time gig is what I call the job from time to time. We get paid $17,000 a year to get beat on, and so we enjoy that. I don't know sometimes why we keep going back, but I've decided to run again this year, and I'm unopposed in November. Well, I do tell people I have opposition, just nobody on the ballot running against me. But come November the 6th, we have an important decision to make in Georgia, and that is who's going to lead our state by voting for a new governor. Our current governor, as you know, is term limited. We're going to be electing a new lieutenant governor, and we're going to have all the other ballots statewide on there as well, to include the Attorney General, Secretary of State, a couple of Public Service Commission seats, and so forth and so on. Of course, you have Rick Jasperse here locally, your state representative, who's running for re-election, and Chuck Payne, who's also representing part of Pickens County in the Senate. So he and I split Pickens County almost 50-50. I think the numbers are very, very close. But primarily it's down the 515 corridor. For the most part, he represents the west side and I represent the east side. So if you live on the east side of Pickens County, I'm your senator. If you live on the west side, predominantly he's your senator, but we both work well together. We vote on a lot of the same issues and have a lot of the same values. We're both conservative electors, and we do represent the majority of our district. Again, we don't please everyone all the time. We do have a balanced budget, unlike Washington. I heard numbers today that our deficit this year in DC is approaching $1 trillion. That's too much spending. The federal government needs to cut back on its expenditures. I don't care if it's a Democrat or a Republican in the White House. We need to manage our budgets better, and we need to balance our budgets. The state does that every year. We're mandated by the Constitution to do that. Our budgets are about $26 billion this year, not including the federal funds that we get for various agencies like the DOT and the Department of Education and so forth and so on. But we take that job very seriously. That budget process takes about 2 months. We start early in the session and we end up adopting the final budget on or near the last week of session. And so I look forward to seeing who our next governor is going to be, and I look forward to working with him or her in January, and I believe that we're going to have a good session next year. Our economy is strong. This past year we had a great year. We cut our income tax for the first time in the history of Georgia. We fully funded QBE, the education formula, for the first time ever. And I can go on and on and on. So I think we had a very successful year. I will say that we've had a good 8-year run with Governor Dale in office. He's been a very strong leader. He's been a very decisive leader. I think that's important in a leadership characteristic in a person of that nature. He's made some tough decisions, some that all of us liked, some of us didn't like at all, but I think he did what he thought was best for Georgia. And that's all we're here to do, is make the best decisions that we can based on the information that's given to us at the time. So again, I'm honored to be your senator, and I hope you'll consider voting for me again in November. And I'll be happy to just take questions. With this many people in the room, there's probably 5 or 6 of you that have a different idea of what I should be up here talking about. So I'm going to let you throw out a question or two, and then I'm going to sit down and let you talk and hear from the candidates that are here tonight. Anybody? Yes, sir.
Georgia agriculture has lost, with Hurricane Michael, somewhere between, I've heard, $1 billion to $2 billion. And, you know, that the challenge of climate change is starting to cost us real money, okay? So I am interested in hearing what you would propose to do in the legislature to meet the challenge of climate change, not only in terms of the inevitable impacts of what's headed our way, but in terms of reducing the likelihood of it getting worse and worse and worse, and pretty much taking out the livelihood of hundreds of thousands of Georgia farmers and citizens.
Sure, that's a good question, and that topic is very important to us. Agriculture is still our #1 industry in Georgia, followed closely by tourism. So both of those industries are important to us. And we don't know yet what the full impact of the hurricanes are going to be to Georgia's economy. We know there's been thousands and thousands of acres of land destroyed in the last 10 days from those storms. We don't know when the next storm is going to hit. Most likely there will be another one. And so we'll rebuild what was destroyed last week, and we'll rebuild Georgia stronger than ever. I'm satisfied that the Florida coast will go through the same experiences. There's been several things that we've done over the years to help protect our environment. I could go on and on and on. One is solar power. We have passed solar power legislation. I carried in the Senate. I'm not sure who the House sponsor was, but it allows people to have solar power on their homes and actually be able to sell that power back to the power company. That's one example. We exceed the emissions requirements of the federal government today in Georgia. We no longer are in a non-attainment zone in Georgia because the car emissions have been lowered. More fuel-efficient cars are being created and made, and all of us are operating those cars on the road today. We protect our streams. We protect our national forest through Georgia laws and regulations. So I think we've been good stewards of the land. We'll continue to do that. We'll continue to look for ways to protect our natural resources. Atlanta gets most of its drinking water from the waters that comes out of this district. 80 or 90% of the drinking water in Atlanta comes from the 51st Senate District, is which one I represent. So I'm always very cautious and careful about how we treat our resources and what we're going to pass on to the next generation. So if you have any other specifics, I'd be happy to entertain those as well. Yes, ma'am.
Hi there. I just heard you mention the QBE.
Yes.
Public education is very important to me. I want to be sure that my grandkids have what they need, to be successful in the future. There's a lot of confusing information about that out in the market, in the public purview. And I hear that we're refunding. I hear that we're refurbishing the funds or whatever, but the austerity cuts were 10 years ago or so, right? So are we funding back to when those cuts happened?
And beyond. So we fully refunded all of the cuts that were done, that started in the Governor Perdue's administration when the depression hit, recession, whatever you want to call it. And so we fully refunded all of those cuts, and we've gone beyond that, and we have fully funded the formula that was passed under Roy Barnes' administration back 20-some years ago.
Are they retroactive to the time?
Well, you can't go back and write a check for something that happened 20 years ago or 10 years ago. Just.
But you're not making up for the inflation factors in that in the new budget. You were just.
Well, sure. If you look at the budget today, it's $26 billion. When I took office in 2011, it was roughly $15 billion. So it's not quite doubled yet, but it's getting close. And just about all of that money gets earmarked for education. Last year, we funded an extra $300 million for teachers to put in the retirement account to shore up those funds in the pension accounts. Every year in the mid-year budget in January, we do what's called a mid-year budget. It's halfway through the fiscal year. We go back and pay back the school systems and shore up the numbers for their full-time equivalent students that have been added to that system. So we're constantly adding to education. It's our #1 priority in the budget, that and public safety. But yes, QBE fully funded, teachers have been given raises. Now, all the school systems in Georgia did not pass those raises on to the teachers. You'll have to take that up with your local school boards. But we fund those raises in that budget. This year, or this last year, we put a raise in for the teachers, and we mandated that those teachers' raises get passed on to the teachers and not absorbed into the local school board's budget. So those are things that we have done recently. So we'll continue to make education a priority. Public education is our #1 priority in our budget.
Thank you for explaining.
You're welcome. Yes, ma'am.
Speaking of public education, I just wanted to hear your views on public education versus funding, not charter. What's vouchers to send kids to different places? Because my opinion, I was a public school teacher, and I believe every child has an equal right to be fully educated to the best of their ability
Sure.
through the public schools.
I think every child is given equal opportunity to be educated through the public schools. Would everyone in the room agree that Pickens County has really good, well-run schools? Would everybody agree with that?
Getting better.
Getting better by the year. Would everyone agree that there are parts of Georgia you would not want to take your children or grandchildren to a public school? So the question becomes, what's best for the kid? What would you do if your child lived in a zip code where the schools continue to fail year after year after year? You could do one or two or three things. One, you could move. You could pick up your family and leave that zip code or that neighborhood where that school is. Two, you could take that child to a private school and try to pay for whatever cost that was. Or what? What would be your third choice?
Improve the public schools.
Improve the public schools. So how much more money do you have to put in a public school that's failing year after year after year when all the other schools around it are doing well? I don't think the answer is necessarily more money. There has to be accountability from a lot of different sources, but one, the parent has to be held accountable. Wouldn't you agree that the parent has a role in educating their own children? They have to make sure they come home at night and they're fed. They have to do their homework. That's the problem I have with my kids at times. And they have to make sure they're ready for that test or that next assignment. And parents have a big responsibility in that. It's not something that you can just say, okay, teacher, this is your job. You go educate my kid and send him home at the end of the year and we're going to do well in life. I think it's a partnership between the local government, the state government, and the parents. Teachers are doing all they can do. We keep pushing more and more mandates into the classroom, more and more testing, more and more regulations. Some of that comes from the feds, some from the state, and some at the local level. Money's not going to fix that. But if a parent wants the best for their child, which I think everyone in here does, and you're in a school system that's failing year after year after year, the school board is going to have to make a decision to make changes, whether that's new leadership in the administration, more principals, different principals, or whatever the problem may be. And if that doesn't work, then the parents should be able to take that child out of that school and put them somewhere where they'll get a good education. And if they're paying taxes and they're paying their local property taxes and their state income taxes and sales taxes, tax, why shouldn't they be allowed to use that same money that they're paying to the state to take that child with them? So a private voucher isn't an evil thought. It's a good idea if their system isn't working. Now your local property taxes are going to stay at that school. They're not going to follow the child. Under the current law, whether it's a scholarship credit or whatever program you're operating under, if you take a child to a private school, you're paying most of that out of your own pocket. There are scholarships available that we created through tax credits, but that local school is not being punished or penalized for the property taxes that are collected in that community. But again, local control also means parental control. Let the parents decide what's best for his or her child. I don't see how you can go wrong in that scenario. Pickens County, great school systems. Lumpkin County, great school systems. We have some of the highest performing schools in Georgia up here in North Georgia. We're not that lucky in Atlanta and other parts of the state. We have systems that are in deep trouble. We have systems where there are 9th grade students that can't read on a 3rd grade level. That has to change. We have to develop a workforce for the 21st century. When we're trying to get big companies in here like Amazon and you know all these other big Fortune 100 companies, we've got to be able to develop a workforce or else those companies aren't going to want to come to Georgia. And you can't just say, well, the schools in Pickens County are great, so you should move up there. That's not going to work. You've got to have good school systems everywhere, and Atlanta is part of the system. It's the economic engine of our state. So we've got to work on the entire state, not just worry about what's good for our home county. So our job as a state senator and as a state rep is to vote for the entire state of Georgia. A lot of times we'll vote for things that may not ever benefit Pickens County directly, but indirectly they have a huge impact on our future. Yes,
Is there
ma'am.
anything that the legislature can do to support PTA organizations to support these parents who are not?
That's a good question. I don't know directly if there's any money in the budget for those organizations or not. There may be. Rick may be the pro on that. He's chairing the higher education committee, so he may have a better feel for that.
But you
most of that
identified the problem as oftentimes being in the home, so.
It's a combination. It's
Yeah.
not all in the home, but there's
something to
variables.
support the
That's
parent-teacher
right.
association.
One thing we did do was a turnaround school program. A couple years ago, we had a constitutional amendment that failed. Governor Deal tried to fix it to where if a school failed for more than 3 years, then the state would take over the operation of that school. A lot of people, teachers, administrators, were fearful of the state having too much control, so that did not pass. So what we've done since then is we passed legislation that allows for the school boards and the State Board of Education to work together. If a school is failing for 3 consecutive years and they go in and hire a new superintendent that works alongside the current local superintendent, and they try to find where some of the problems are and where they can turn those schools around. So it's a little bit early to see if those results are going to be beneficial or not. 2 more years we'll have a track record to see if that's working. But that new superintendent has been hired. He is working. He's in his 2nd year of employment right now. So time will tell. But we all want what's best for our young people. That's our future. And we've got to help educate our next generation of workforce.
Thank you, Senator
Thanks for the
Gooch.
question. You're welcome.
We need to proceed. Good question. Fantastic questions. I think I might ask you guys to come up and moderate. But Of course, I neglected to mention too that Mr. Gooch is our senator from the 51st district. I should have said that before, but in my age, I tend to get a little forgetful. Anyway, our next segment, it'll be a 30-minute segment with the candidates for the 11th House District, Mr. Rick Jasperse, who is the incumbent Republican, and his challenger, Democrat Lee Shiver. Let me explain the format for you. Because of our time limitation and also agreements ahead of time, we will not be taking any questions from the floor during this part. You're welcome to hang around. I'm sure that the candidates will want to shake your hands and you can ask them any questions personally if you want to do that. Each candidate will be given 5 minutes to make an opening statement, and then after that, I will propose a question to them in which they will both respond. I will alternate between them, so one will answer first and the next one will answer first the next time, and so forth and so on. Also, I don't think I really need to point this out since we are in the Pickens room of Pickens County, Georgia. I ask that everybody please be civil. This is not the chambers of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Anyway, all right, up first, opening comments. If you don't mind, alphabetical, first time, Mr. Jasperse,
Sure.
opening comment.
Well, thank you. I'm Rick Jasperse, and I want to take the opportunity to just ask for your vote. If you'll re-elect me as your state representative. The gentleman in the back there asked about South Georgia, and if you really want to find out about it, go look at my Facebook page. And I'm on the Ag Committee, and me and my friends, we've just been texting back and forth, and lots of just tragic pictures from South Georgia. And I hope you take time to look at it. It'll be a very great educational opportunity. But it's great to be here tonight, and I really thank the Progress, Dan back there, and folks to taking their time and putting us all together to be here. It's been a great honor for me to serve as your state representative. It's something I don't take very lightly, and I work very hard at. But Georgia's on a roll, and Steve Gooch talked a little bit about, we are the #1 place to do business in America, and we are the least taxed people per capita in America. We have the lowest unemployment in our state in decades, and revenues are growing. That gives us the opportunity to do things like fully fund education for the first time since 1980. It also helps us fund Medicaid for those in need. It created tax credits for hospitals like Piedmont Mountainside and Murray Medical Center that I represent to help pay our law enforcement better. And those dollars also improve transportation, just like the inland port on Highway 411 in Murray County. And I make this case because it didn't happen by accident or dumb luck. It was careful, thoughtful, conservative leadership that brought us out of the worst depression in decades. It's like Senator Gooch said, we've had a great leader in Governor Nathan Deal and David Rawson and Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle. And folks like Steve and myself, who've been elected 4 times, so we've worked very hard on this because we share the values of this region. We work hard to restrain spending our tax dollars. And when I was writing this, I said, has it been easy? And I said, goodness no. And if you've been reading to pre-K, if you've ever read to a little kid, that comes from Pete the Cat. And I spent time last week reading to kids, little pre-K kids all around the district. But we argue and fight, and we wrestle to accomplish the goals to keep Georgia a great place to live. You bet we did it, and we did it knowing where we wanted to end up. I think Steve will just agree, and Chuck will too, that we want to be fiscally responsible. Keep our taxes low, more money in your pocket. You'll see that this April. We improved educational opportunities at all levels. We maintain freedom and liberty, and we take care of those who can't take care of themselves. And most importantly, we set the table for continued growth, just not now, but the future. Senator Gooch and I carried 2 bills that were vital for this continued growth. Senator Gooch carried one, he's very shy, didn't talk about it, on rural broadband. Very integral to what we're doing across the state in expanding rural broadband, and I thank you for that. I did the big bill on health care this year. For rural health care, I'm a part of the Rural Development Council, And I had a bill that really took a lot of time, but increased the tax credits for rural hospitals all across the state, made pharmacies safer, helped with malpractice insurance across the state, created a center for innovation, better training for board members, and created micro hospitals in areas where hospitals fail. Both of these bills, Senator Gooch and I took a lot of intensive work, studying, listening, and working with others to be successful. We passed these bills because they were reasonable and effective. And the two things I think I learned early on in the legislature to be successful, you've got to be reasonable so that you can be effective. And John Meadows from Calhoun taught me that. You know, those who know me well, I'm very honest, sincere, truthful. I don't pander, don't run from tough issues, never have. You know, I know why I'm there, and that's to serve you. And like Steve Gooch said, we don't agree on everything. We never will. My beautiful wife, Marcia, 37 years. We don't agree all the time either. But I take it all in stride, knowing that years ago I had a great legislator named Garland Penholster tell me a little story. I said, Rick, you can be a great legislator because you care about people and you listen. He said, but in the end, Rick, I want you to remember one thing. You got to come home. There'll be a day when you don't do this. And so when you go down to Atlanta and the bills you do and the things you work on, make sure you can go home and cry. But you can go to the grocery store, you can go back to Rotary, you can go to the Lions Club, you can go sit in church and hold your head high for what you did. And I have. And it's been an honor to serve, and I look forward to discussing the issues tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jasperse. All right. Mr. Shiver, 5 minutes,
Thanks, Larry.
open statement.
Thank you. I'm new to this, so please bear with me. Thank you all for being here. I thank the progress, thank Dan, and I need to tell you why I'm doing this. When the Parkland, Florida shooting happened, it bothered me quite a bit. An old fraternity brother of mine posted on his Facebook account that he had to conduct the funeral of one of those students at Parkland High School. And so I hadn't seen Mark in about 30 years. He's a priest, was a priest down in Coral Springs. And so I sent him a Facebook post that said something along the lines of, I'm sorry, you know, I don't know what it must be like. And he explained to me that it was the hardest thing he'd ever done. So then we private messaged, and he told me about going, having to go to the morgue and performing this religious sacrament over this dead girl's body in the morgue. And he said that she had a hole in the side of her head the size of a baseball with her skull peeled back. I had been happily retired for 2 years. We moved back here because Pickens County is a great place. I like the people. It's got a great vibe. I want to be here. I'm staying here. It's a great place. So I was retired, happily retired. But ladies and gentlemen, I could not stop thinking about this. I was the principal of Tift County High School in Tifton, Georgia in 1999 when Columbine happened. And I remember dealing with those students and that staff the next day. 20% of the students were absent the next day. Later that summer, I was appointed superintendent of schools here in Pickens County. We talked about a lot of things. There was a lot of things, as you know, Rick's talking about, where you have to fix things and do things for the right reasons. And there was a lot we had to do with the school system, and I'm really proud of what we accomplished. But one of the things we started working on immediately was school security and school safety, because that was a frightening incident. And then I remembered and started thinking about when I was the director of the Georgia School for the Deaf, when the Virginia Tech massacre happened. Those kids were frightened. They were scared. The staff was scared. Most of the staff are deaf and hard of hearing. Then I got to thinking about the kids down in Albany in my last gig as an elementary principal when the Sandy Hook massacre happened. And I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I wasn't eating well, and I wasn't having the fun I was supposed to be having. So I didn't know what I was supposed to do or what I could do. And it occurred to me that what I needed to do was go see my representative. I've known Rick since 1999. He helped us with some projects at my house. I think I was a 4-H speaker one time at one of the banquets. I went to see him in his office in Atlanta. I asked for an appointment, went to see him. I was very warmly received, and I just put it to him. I said, what are you doing about this? What can you do about the stuff that's happening? And Rick wanted to talk to me about the mental health of students, the mental health of people. He wanted to talk to me about terrorist attacks in China. I said, I understand that, but what about the guns? Now, Rick, I told Rick, I said, I'm a gun owner. I'm keeping my guns. I've had them a long time. But what about the guns these school and mass shooters are using? And Rick's response to me was, there's nothing practical that we can do about the guns. And I had a hard time with that. And so a minute later it was, if this had happened at Pickens High School, what would you be doing differently? And Rick said, I don't know of anything I would be doing differently. Well, that was really hard for me. It was really, really hard. We shook hands. I left. I got on the MARTA, rode back to the North Spring Station, and started thinking about all this. And started doing some research. I did not know, ladies and gentlemen, about Georgia's gun laws. I knew nothing. Completely ignorant, not my bag. Didn't know anything about it. But I found out that other states had done some things that Georgia could easily do, and we haven't done. Georgia does not have a cooling off or waiting period for the purchase of a firearm. A handgun, yes, but not a firearm. We don't restrict magazine capacities. Other states have done this. There is no restriction on gun magazines here. We don't require background checks on every gun sale. Florida raised their minimum age to 21, when in Georgia, an 18-year-old could buy a semi-automatic rifle and return to school the same day. We don't prohibit domestic abusers from possessing firearms. We don't require unattended guns in homes to be kept in locked storage. So I found out there's lots that we can do. And I feel strongly that we need to do some of these things before something terrible happens. And that's why I am in this.
Thank you, Mr. Shiver. We're going to begin the debate portion of it now, of our program. I neglected to mention before, if there is something that a candidate would like to respond to directly, we will allow that, but keep your responses to 2 minutes. And Dr. Shiver, I'm going to segue into what you were talking about just a moment ago. I had to sort of interrupt you because of the time limit, but we know that your slogan is do something. And we know that as far as you're concerned, the heart of the matter is need to do something to prevent tragedies at schools like what happened in Parkland. What exactly do you propose to do as far as gun laws in Georgia? What needs to be changed? And of course, Georgia is they're very favorable to the Second Amendment. How are you going to try to convince other representatives to go along with you?
That would be if I would be elected.
Oh, of course. Of course, I know you can still work for free when you're not.
I assure you, if I were to be elected over this man, it would be a miracle and a shock to the Georgia legislature. It would. But it would send a very clear message. And so when you're asking about what I would propose doing, I've already mentioned some of those things. I actually compiled a list of 39 things that we could do that would be possible, that would improve school safety, that would help reduce the ongoing threat, the rising threat of school and mass shootings in the state of Georgia. And so, I don't want to go through all this list, but in addition to the ones I just mentioned, other states have provided for what's called red flag laws or extreme risk protection laws. Those laws are important. Florida enacted several of these 3 weeks to the day following the Parkland High School shooting. But extreme risk protection orders, which are known as red flag laws, allow a judge to temporarily remove the guns from someone that a person close to them, like a significant other or a family member or a parent, hears this person, knows this person has access to guns, and is making threats against themselves and other people. This guy in Florida, this kid in Florida that did this 19-year-old, they all knew about it. They had all heard about it. Florida did not have extreme risk protection orders when this happened. One state that just implemented one of these basically has a 10-day hearing period that is required for someone that a judge would say, we're going to do this, and they get to have a hearing. So there are different things that we can do, and there's lots more. We don't need bump stocks. That's what the guy used in Las Vegas to kill 58 concert goers 1 year ago this month. I don't like the campus carry law. I know that Rick co-sponsored that. I don't think that's what we need on our campuses. We could have all gun purchasers complete a gun safety course. We could require testing. We spend more money and more time. We have more laws about cars and automobiles and boats than we do about guns. Even hunting. We have laws like it's illegal to have a cocked crossbow in your car. I mean, and so if you go to the hunting laws and you looked at all this kind of stuff, it's like, well, why is all this stuff there? But we don't have these laws that other states have already put in place that can make us all safer. That have nothing to do with taking away everybody's guns. So that's some of the stuff. I've got a list of 39 things on my website, and I'm glad that was one of the questions.
Rick, how do you respond?
Same.
What do you plan to do?
Well, thank you. You know, we've been active in school safety. I think in 2014, I remember a bill that came through that Pastor Paul Battles, who's a state representative from Cartersville, proposed, and he's the guy that got this preacher from Cartersville, gave and worked on a bill to let a school determine who could carry a weapon in their school to stop an invader. And we included his language in a bill that I sponsored, was House Bill 60. There's very little or no opposition to that. And then I want to just, how long do I have? 2 minutes, right? I have as long as he did.
Three minutes.
Okay, well, the thing is I went to a shooter training, you know, for law enforcement recently. And when the first shot to EMS they called in EMS, it took 7 minutes for them to get to the school. The first law enforcement person to get there, just to get to the door. Well, in that 7 minutes, I don't like it. And some people say you shouldn't arm student teachers or staff or whatever, but Paul Battles looked at that 7 minutes and said, you gotta get a white ribbon too. Also, we gave, this past year in the legislature, we gave $16 million to schools to do whatever they wanted to. They felt to protect their children. The Trump administration recently awarded Georgians $16 million to do the same thing to about 10 different school systems. Candidate Kent has currently promised $100 million to do just that. You know, study committees are at work right now. You know, we're doing something about this. We're studying it. We're looking at it as the legislature should. I don't know if you can ask Steve, there's probably 17 different study committees going on right now for everything under the sun. But that's what we do. Yeah, I met with the Secret Service. Yeah, the same people that protect the president about school security. They came to a meeting I had. They talked about threat assessments, just like we would protect our president. We looked at that. I passed bills. I look at here that, you know, that judges take license for felons, you know, mental health reporting, GCI reporting, tighten up license requirements. We've done all that. You know, we're looking at things right now in these study committees. Know something, say something. That's the failure of Parkland. But we're going to see that we can do that a little bit better in Georgia. Phone apps to notify EMS, school assessment teams to look at children who are threats and find out why. Looking at mental health, which Mr. Shiver discounts, what we think is a very important part of it. School resource officers, money for that. But we're going to look at a lot of different things. But we'll come back with a plan between the Senate and the House that will help address this. Yes, sir. I see you standing. I respect that.
Well, I just stand up to give you
Okay.
a little bit of a warning.
Sure, okay. It's like the 2:32.
Okay. All right, thank y'all. Our next question. It's been said that all politics is local, but a lot of people are really concerned these days with the divisiveness of our nation. The political rancor is at a fever pitch. What some people say, the mob mentality, kick them while they're down type thing. I want to thank you, local candidates, for shying away from this kind of negative campaigning. And I made sort of a joke earlier about this is not the Senate Judiciary Committee chambers, and I'm very proud of that we can be very civil. But that being said, what role do you think that negative campaigning does play in politics, locally, even up at the federal level, and the fact that the candidates at the top of the ballot are engaged so furiously in it? Do you condone it? Do you condemn it? Mr. Jasper,
Sure,
you'll go
thank
first
you.
this time.
I think number one, it's not normally the candidates who are involved in the ugly talk. Because I think, you were taught in the elementary school, what comes around goes around. I think candidates are usually very respectful. Most of the ones I've seen are very respectful of each other, and they listen. Most of us are trained to listen and be attentive and listen to other people. But it's the outside influence that really drives this discussion. The paid lobbyists for one X group or another, and they're on the far right and far left. There are just as many, hate mongers on either side. It's gotten worse because of the internet, I'm sure, because people can hide behind it. I get a lot of hateful emails over the years on some meaningless things, but that's just the way people are. But I think it's incumbent on us to set an example and try to do the best you can. In the legislature, I think if you went and asked the Democratic leadership and the rank and file member of the Democratic Party about Rick, they would tell you that I'm easy to talk to, that I listen, I look them right in the eye and tell them where they stand. I've been the chairman of committees for about 3 years now. I do hear Democrat bills. Some Republicans don't, but I do. I let them have their say. I may not agree with them, I may change the bill, because that's just the way the legislature is. But we have a good discourse, and I think it's fine. And I enjoy it. I mean, you can ask my dear wife, Marcia. I talk to a lot of people on the phone every day, every night, every morning. There's at least 4 or 5 that I'm calling every day. Some of them are scared because they're afraid I'm going to attack them over their issue or over their opinion. That doesn't happen. Never has and never will. She'd jerk my ear off if I did that. And, but that being said, it's just respect for people. And I think you'll find that Rick Jasperse is respectful of people, that he listens, and dadgummit, I do change my mind. And that's just, I hope that answered that.
Your response, Dr. Shiver.
Thanks, Larry, and I hope Rick will change his mind about some of these things. I have to agree with what he said, though. Leaders are the ones who set the tone, set the agenda, and we're supposed to be leaders. It's supposed to be leadership by example. Now, if I may, and I hope he doesn't get angry with me, Will Bell is here, and the local Republican Party had an event at Appalachian Gun back in March, I believe. I saw the notice. It was a Republican membership drive and Second Amendment event. And I was headed to Atlanta to participate in the March for Our Lives demonstration. My daughter teaches in the Atlanta Public Schools, so that's where I was going. But my campaign team thought I probably needed to go to the event being held by the Republicans at the Appalachian Gun, Pawn, and Shooting Range. Rick was there, and a lot of people that didn't agree with my viewpoint. But I walked straight to Mr. Bell, whom I had not met. I introduced myself, and I said, "Is it okay for me to be here?" And he said, "We are glad you are here. This is open to all candidates, everybody." And I was there 4 hours. I did not have any hostile conversations with anybody. Had people that disagreed with me, told me, like Rick, don't agree with you. But they listened, and it was cordial, it was respectful. That's how we get there. To me, that's how we get there. We have to have people who can talk with each other, agree to disagree, and move it on. And I thought to myself at the time, even though I just started my campaign, if that were representative of the way it was going to be the rest of the way, this might not be as hard as it's turned out to be. But I've not had those exchanges. I told Mr. Bell earlier today, the only really hostile exchange I had was at the barbecue blues and boogie festival in Calhoun. And it didn't last very long because after this guy startled me, I just said, "Hey, he's on out of here." And then this morning, of all places, I was invited to be interviewed on Fetch Your News out of LJ. And I did not know what I was getting into when I went up there. That was an interesting time. I had not met Mr. Pritchard, and I got to hear his half of the interview, his phone interview with Brian Kemp. And so listening to Mr. Pritchard, I thought, all right, Shiver, well, you said you were going to do this, so get ready. And but I have to say, and if you will look at this, it was a very fair interview, and I was very appreciative of the fact that this guy, who is head of this media outlet, was saying, we want to present both viewpoints. Our listeners, our viewers need to hear the other side. That's really important. And being able to do that, and being able to get out there and say and do and be received is a huge part of getting at what you're asking us about. And I think as we continue to do this campaign, all other campaigns, we have to keep doing it, because I quite frankly get very, very tired of what's on the television and what I hear in a lot of other places that's so divisive, and I think is not good for any of us.
Okay, it's time now for closing comments. Both candidates will be given 3 minutes for the closing comments. Dr. Shiver, you go first this time.
Crumbs, Larry. I got religious liberty, immigration, jobs, economy, transportation, agriculture, environment. You got that?
I'm sure that Dr. Shiver will be hanging around after the debate to talk to you about that.
Guns are not evil and lawless, nor are they the embodiment of liberty. To claim otherwise is extremist in either way and is un-American. As anyone who studied our history knows, there is a middle ground where gun rights and laws providing for public safety can coexist. The Supreme Court's decision in Heller versus D.C. in 2008 validated our right to possess a gun for self-defense, while affirming that right can and should be subject to some regulation in the interest of public safety. The majority opinion was written by the late Justice Anthony Scalia. The NRA fought tooth and nail for this case to never go before the Supreme Court. Why? Because they thought that there was more than a good chance that the highest court in the land might deviate from what our founders and the framers of the Constitution intended. The NRA was wrong again. Ever since our country's founding, the right to own a firearm has lived side by side with gun control. The founders, in fact, had gun control. There were laws back in the day that required armed citizens to report with specific kinds of guns to militia musters, which included weapons inspections. Local officials often required militia, those guns to be registered. There were also laws that required gunpowder to be stored in a safe place. They also imposed complete bans on gun ownership by free black people and political dissidents, like me. There was a time when the NRA promoted the idea that there should be limits to concealed carry permits. It is my position that clinging to an either-or proposition when it comes to common sense gun legislation is not in the best interest of our collective safety and our children's future. The incumbent maintains that there's nothing to be done about the guns. He says there's no law, no policy, no change in Georgia's gun statutes that could possibly reduce the level of gun violence in our state and the growing probability of another school or mass shooting that will claim the lives of innocent children and law-abiding citizens, much less the alarming and heartbreaking increase in the rate of child, teen, and veteran suicides. Like Rick, I know there is unspeakable evil in this world. I also know that mental illness is part of the bigger problem. But being angry and hateful is not mental illness. So I have no idea why the campus carry bill he co-sponsored did not include mental health or training. And as a Christian, yeah, I just said that, I believe that God gave us brains for a moral reason. We can figure this out, and we will. Just like we figured out what to do about the incredible number of drunk driving deaths on our highways back in the day. We changed our laws. Remember Mothers Against Driving Drunk? Today it's Moms Demand Action. Do some people still get behind the wheel under the influence? Yep, but thousands of lives have been saved because we've changed our laws to protect all of us. Just this morning on Atlanta TV news stations, they were talking about how the new law prohibiting texting while driving has already resulted in significantly fewer accidents, hospitalizations, and deaths. And no one had their phones taken away. My proposals can't possibly guarantee that our absolute nightmare won't happen, but they dang sure can't reduce the threat that continues to grow unchecked because the people in charge wish and hope and pray and refuse to accept the role of guns in school and mass shootings. I know I wasn't the only person thinking about this stuff while I was watching the Pride of Pickens march down Main Street in the Marble Festival Parade. Dozens of other states have already enacted these proposals into law, and they have been upheld by the courts. What are we waiting for, really? 3 of the 10 deadliest mass public shootings in U.S. history have happened in the last 12 months. More than 150,000 students attending at least 170 schools have experienced a shooting on campus since the Columbine school massacre in 1999. I was the principal. I was a high school principal when it happened. I know what it was like. I know what kids worry about every day, and their parents, and our teachers, and principals, and school staff, and school board members, and superintendents. I was appointed here later that summer, and I'm very proud of all that we accomplished in the 6 years I served the people of Pickens County. Obviously, I know what it's like to disrupt people's comfort zones. This is worth it. And just this morning, a special agent for the GBI reported these statistics. There has been an overall increase in active shooter incidents since 2000, with an average of 20 over each of the last 4 years in Georgia. The average number of fatalities per incident has increased, and of the 73 school threats reported in February alone, 23% resulted in an arrest. The reality, ladies and gentlemen, is while the gun homicide rate has dropped by nearly half over the last 25 years, the number of school and mass shootings and the deaths they have caused has risen dramatically and is still going up. To me, all of this talking and worrying about school safety is a good thing, but it must include the responsibility and the accountability for the undeniable role of guns in school and mass shootings if we're really trying to do everything we can to protect our children and public safety. And if you don't agree, pick Rick. I'm only in this for the best of reasons, and I hope you agree with me. I sincerely and humbly request your vote. Why should we have to wait for something terrible to happen in Georgia before we do something? Thank you for listening.
Well, thank you, Progress, again, for truly being a community newspaper. You know, I subscribe to 5 different newspapers, and I appreciate what the Progress does and bringing people together and letting people know what's going on in our community. And thank you, Mr. Hatter, for doing this. And I especially thank you, my neighbors, really, who've entrusted me to do this job. You know, we touched on a few issues, and I'm going to take my time to talk about a few others. You know, economic development is important to our community. You know, back when I first kind of got into higher education and I had complaints in this community about our technical school, I took it on. I took it on as an important issue that affects the economic development and livelihood of the people in our community. Met with the presidents of the university, of colleges, met with the chancellors of all these things to try to get some action back in our technical school. And we've done that. It's been hard, it's been difficult. And you'll see that's why I'm the chairman of higher education, because I know that's the opening and the door to just better education and economic development for just the regular people that I deal with every day. You know, we've worked to improve CTA in high schools. We've given them lots more money to keep and make sure they've got the best equipment so they can train each other. And on economic development, we've worked hard on transportation. With Chairman Gooch over there working on transportation, it's been a very good thing. You know, our region to improve needs a number of things. One's transportation, like I said, technical schools, but the use of rail. Yeah, I look forward to someday seeing the train, you know, come up tracks. I think that'll be real neat. I did say, you know, I just wanted to address the gun thing, because you notice I don't mention taking law-abiding citizens' guns away. Our laws are very clear. And in some place, and they're in place now, they're very clear and in place now, and they make murder illegal. For some reason, sick aggressors don't think killing's wrong. And I don't really know how to address that. But we're looking at a number of things in the legislature that will. But I want to tell you the vast majority of what we do is help you with the big issues that come in your life every day from government. I have was the luckiest job that I could ever have had was to be the county agent in Pickens County for 30 years, because I helped somebody every day. You know, people call, I listen. It happens every day. It happened 4 times today because I'm easily accessible and people know who I am, and it works out real good for them that way. Yeah, I might be, just in this week, I've helped people with income taxes, health inspection, voter registration, Department of Family and Children's Services, driver's license, and the Katie Beckett waiver. We worked really hard on helping those people solve their problems with state government. And I take those issues very seriously, as I do my own, and I work to solve them. It's a very rewarding, and to solve the gridlock of state government. And I like working on it very hard. And yes, we work really hard, as Steve Gooch said, in January to March. But I've treated this job, my part-time job that we laugh about, as a full-time job representing your house and the State House. And I thank you for giving me the opportunity. Thank you.
Before these two gentlemen step down, I want to say one thing too. I want to apologize to both of y'all. As a moderator, I try to make sure the decorum is correct, and I always try to refer to the candidates as Mr. Jasperse, Mr. Shiver, or Dr. Shiver. I caught myself saying Rick and Lee. I have known both these gentlemen for decades, and they're both very good friends of mine. So
I think we both prefer Rick and Lee.
but, I don't know whether you caught that or not, but I was calling them Rick and Lee. But thank y'all. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, the candidates for the 54th Senate District. The format will be the same. 5 minutes for opening comment. Then we'll ask questions. There'll be 3 minutes for those, for the responses from both of them. To be fair, we'll ask everybody the same question. We'll alternate who we begin with on each series of questions. And if there is a direct attack, and I'm so proud that we have been so civil tonight, there have been no direct attacks, you will be allowed a couple of minutes to reply, respond. The candidates are Mr. Chuck Payne, the incumbent Republican, and Democrat, Mr. Michael Morgan, his challenger. We will go, it's all right, once again, by alphabetical order. Mr. Morgan, you go first with the opening statement.
I want to say also thanks to the Progress for doing this and to Dan for doing this as well. And if you want to, you can refer to me as Michael. That's quite okay. Now, usually when we do these sort of things, I do defer to the senator's office, and I call him Senator. But when we're just talking, I call him Chuck. And so, you know, you may, if I slip up and call him Chuck, you just forgive me on that one. If you expected to come in here tonight and hear some rancor and some headbutting and going back and forth, well, you're going to be disappointed because one thing that the senator and we've discussed is he made a statement at the last forum that we were at. After we were done, he said, "Thank you for your integrity." And one of the things that I can say that in this race is both of us have maintained a certain level of integrity. I don't attack him; he doesn't attack me, because what it is this is nothing personal. We basically have a difference of ideas on a political line. There's, you know, I've talked to Chuck, and he's a good man. He really is. He's somebody that I think I could play golf with. I honestly do. But we have a difference of ideas, and just because I don't dislike him or hate him, because you know that's not something in me, I do think we ought to hold him accountable. He makes decisions in Atlanta, as does the Republican Party, and we ought to hold them accountable for that. So if you thought you were going to come in here tonight and hear me just hammer him, that's not going to happen. So one thing I do want to tell you about, like my friend Lee Shiver, I do have a main platform. Now, Lee's is obviously guns, gun violence, and how that affects our children. Mine is a little more encompassing, but my main platform is a young man named Matthew Morgan. Matthew Morgan is my 7-year-old son. Matthew is autistic. And because of Matthew, I have learned a lot about healthcare. I've learned a lot about education. I've learned a lot about gun violence in schools. And I've decided that I want to do something for Matthew. Because as the senator was saying a while ago, Georgia is on a roll. It really is. But some of us are being left behind. People like Matthew. There are people out there that don't have health care. There are people out there that are working 2 and 3 jobs. So when we say that we're at 3.8% unemployment, well, yeah, we are. Because one person working 2 jobs is going to drive that unemployment rate down. We have children out here who are going through active shooter drills when they should be learning math. That bothers me. That bothers me a lot. And so when we say that there are certain things that we can and can't do, I think those exploratory committees that we're talking about, we need to hurry those along. I do think that there are rules that are being applied in different states that the state of Georgia should be looking at. And we'll talk about that in a minute when we get into guns in schools. But I do believe that in the state of Georgia, we can do better. I absolutely think that we can do better. Now, let me just tell you real quickly about myself. I'm not some Nancy Pelosi Democrat. I've never met Nancy Pelosi. I've never been to San Francisco. I'm a North Georgia Democrat. And what that really means is I'm a little bit more conservative than the National Democratic Party. I was raised by Republicans. Mom and Daddy are not going to vote for me in this election. They're going to vote for me. They really will. Seriously. But that has an influence. But that has an influence in my life. I grew up as a Reagan Republican. And when I went to college at a very small, conservative Christian college, Berry College down in Rome, I came out a Democrat. Not because I wanted to reject Mom and Daddy, not because I rebelled, but because I saw more that related to me in the Democratic Party. Didn't mean I gave up my faith. It didn't mean that I gave up my conservative leanings. It simply meant that I saw things in the Democratic Party that were more in line with my vote. And I think what that comes down to, and what Chuck and I can agree on, is you're going to see that we agree on almost everything. It's those few things that differentiate us. It's going to be health care. It's going to be infrastructure. It's going to be gun control. That's what's going to differentiate us. But for the most part, we're all just Americans trying to do the best we can. We're all Georgians trying to do the best we can. We're all citizens of Pickens County, Whitfield County, Murray County, and Gordon County trying to do the best we can. I know it's almost 15 seconds left, so I would appreciate your vote this year. Thank you.
Mr. Payne?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you to Progress also, and for all of you for being here, for having us here tonight. Only being a first-term senator, it's kind of like, I'm not like Steve that everybody's known, so I kind of like, I'm still introducing myself, everyone, so I'll just kind of give you a little bit about my background and who I am and what drives me, so you kind of better understand what motivates me. Right after high school, I went off to the Army. I served in the 1st 504th Infantry of the 82nd Airborne Division. Served 4 years. The only good thing that I got out of the Army was my wife. I met her in North Carolina, and she, I asked her to marry me with 2 years still going in the military. And so I was probably the only guy that was crazy enough to propose with a condition, but my condition was, but I don't want to be married and in the Army at the same time. So thankfully, she waited till just before I was getting out, and we got married. Have a crazy January 2nd anniversary, because we got married just before I was going to get out in February, and that was in 1988. Came back to Georgia, and my first child was born in 1990. And in 1991, I was sitting there looking at my 6-month-old daughter, and just realized that my life didn't matter anymore. So I understand what he's talking about when he's talking about his son. But that was the moment I decided I had to be involved. And after having been served in the military, I'll tell you one of the hardest things that I had to contend with was my wife came in one day, and this was only months after I'd gotten out, and I was just sick at my stomach and just, and moping around the house, and she said, "What is wrong with you? And what's going on?" And I said, "Honey, my unit was just deployed to Panama." And I felt like an absolute failure because I wasn't there with my brothers to go with them. And I think that's one of those things that just was an inspirational moment that stuck with me for all these years, because I thought, well, I couldn't go that day, but I'm going to serve. Somehow I'm going to give of myself for a better tomorrow for my kids and for generations to come, even though I couldn't go that day. And so I did get involved in politics, and I went to work in our local party, and within 5 years I was elected chairman of the Whitfield County Republican Party. I served in that capacity, and I never had any ambition in politics. I never had any desire to run for anything. I just wanted to have a voice at the table, and I really kind of like the idea that, you know, I have Congressman Gray's cell phone number. I have, you know, I was able to have connection with people so my voice could be heard. That's all I really wanted, was my voice to be heard. But I worked with the Georgia Department of Juvenile Justice for 30 years. And I worked as a juvenile probation officer. I first started working with kids in detention, fell in love with that, and after 6 years I went to the community and became a juvenile probation officer for the state. And literally the last day I worked after 30 years, it was the hardest thing I ever walked away from, was something I felt like I just knew God put me on this earth to do. I had a talent that people were just amazed by at reaching kids, and I don't know why I had that talent and that ability, but also one of the greatest blessings of my life is when I did run for Senate 2 years ago. I went in and told my wife one day, I said, do you realize right now there are 20-something-year-olds, 30-something-year-olds, and 40-something-year-olds on Facebook right now and telling people to go vote for Chuck. And these are people that I once had on probation. I said, there's no greater testament in my 30-year career than that. Keep the plaques. That's what I want. So that's why I'm here. That's why I'm running for the Senate. That's why I continue to serve. This has been an endeavor of service, and I am proud to serve with Senator Gooch and Rick. They have just been great help for a first-term senator coming into the Senate and pointing in the right directions. I have been blessed that I was to serve on the Senate Finance Committee, and I was elected the second year to be a secretary of the Senate Finance Committee. The Senate Finance Committee is a pretty big committee, and so for a first-time senator, that was pretty. Somebody saw something in me that they trusted to put me in that position, and I take that position very seriously. I am a member of the public, so that what serving on the Senate Finance Committee, that means I got to vote twice to cut your income taxes. Also, I serve as a member of the Public Safety Committee, which is, after my 30 years of working with kids and families, I feel like I really contributed to that committee because it's heartfelt, and I understand where rubber hits the road, and a lot of times, a lot of policies we make in Atlanta it doesn't make sense when it gets to the ground. And so I've offered my voice in that. I also serve as a member of the state and local government operations, and also a member of state institutions and property committees. I am truly committed just to be a public servant. One of the greatest compliments I've had in my first 2 years is I've had someone who was here in Jasper. And that was, we've seen you so often, it's just, you would think you were from here. And that to me says, that's what I want to do. Because I am retired, I get to do this full time. And I am going to commit myself to be anywhere and everywhere that anybody needs me to be, and have my ear open and listen and do what I can to help. I ask for your vote when we get to Election Day, and I appreciate your support. Thank you very much.
Our first question for the candidates, something I think that's probably near and dear to all of us, well, maybe not near and dear, but at least touches all of us, and that's the issue of traffic. Here in North Georgia, we have traffic issues, nothing like they do a little south of us, but getting to the metro area and back has become a major problem. And even, I don't know whether you guys notice or not, on weekends, this time of the year, traffic is horrible up here. Last Saturday, I saw traffic backed up from 108 down past Worley Crossroads, and we don't even have the leaf lookers coming yet. And I live off Worley Crossroads, and sometimes it takes me 5 minutes to get in the road down there. But anyway, for you first, Mr. Payne, is there anything that can be done? Is there a magic wand that can help alleviate some of the traffic problems?
A magic wand? Well, first question I have, if you would, raise your hand. Raise your hand if you are born and raised here in Pickens County. So roughly, what'd you say?
Third.
A third of the room? Well, see, that to me is Georgia's growth. Is, you know, that is the problem, and it's a hindrance, but it's also a blessing. We are growing as a state, and there's a lot of headaches that go with that. And like I just recently I worked for DJJ, and my last 9 years was at Murray County, and juvenile probation officer in Murray County. And they were talking about one day the inland port. And everybody was complaining about this inland port that was coming up into Murray County. And you know, and I'm sitting there, and I've already realized, you know, this is going to stop all those transfer trucks from driving through our state, you know, all the way to Savannah. This is going to be a great thing. But they were just all going, the prostitutes were surely coming, and the drugs were surely coming, and the truck drivers and everything. And I just walked in there and I said, you know, can I tell y'all something without y'all getting mad at me? And they said, yeah, what is that? And I said, you promise you won't get mad at me? And I said, they said, yes, what is he going to say? And I said, you can't kick progress in the mouth. You know, and there are a lot of times that when you're growing, and there are growing pains and things you have to work through, and it's going to be a continual growth. But one day, but to sit there and realize that, you know, this is not a good thing, I don't see how you can just fight that, because this is going to bring business. You know, if somebody has to ship a lot of stuff over containers overseas, where would they want to build their plant? Maybe in North Murray County, right down the road from the inland port. I said, this is going to bring progress to Murray County. And I just, after talking to them for a while, they really just, you know, it got to be where they saw my point that, you know, you can't just kick progress in the mouth. But at the same time, there is growing pains. And I'll tell you one of these little things that I love history. I always have loved history. And one day as I'm driving back and forth, and I'm one of those crazy people that drives back and forth to Atlanta every day from Whitfield County. And I'm sitting in Atlanta traffic just like everybody else. And I'm, you know, trying to, come on, move, get out of my way. I'm just like everybody else, like hurry, hurry, hurry. I got to get there now. I should have been there a half hour ago. And then all of a sudden it dawned on me. And I thought, Chuck, your grandparents lived in a time when this trip took days. This trip took days to go from North Georgia to get to Atlanta. Literally took days by horse and buggy. And here you are complaining about your trip's going to take you 30 minutes longer than what it normally would if there was no traffic. So I think a lot of it's just, you know, us having better patience, understanding that we are working through a lot of these problems that we have, and I really believe that we will get them solved in time. And I think we are very accessible as a delegation, and then we're always going to be there to listen to you and your concerns. And I'll tell you, I've been on the phone more times with the DOT than I've been with anybody, any other agency of the state government.
Thank you. Mr. Morgan?
So I live about 5 miles from that inland port, and you're right, they hated it. My sister lives maybe 2 miles from it. I pass it every day when I take my wife to work. And the thing that I found out about that inland port is that was not a partisan issue. The lady that, the commissioner in Murray County at the time that worked to get that brought there is a Republican. And boy, they voted her out as soon as they could on that next election because they hated that inland port. But Chuck is right. We can't slow progress down. The company that I work with is a German company. And when they were coming to build the new facility that I work at in Cleveland, Tennessee, they looked all around this area to see where they could build this business that ultimately created about 12,000 jobs in and around the Cleveland, Tennessee area. They considered Northwest Georgia and rejected it because at the time they had no way to get the raw materials to the facility that we had. Now, where we put it is right next to I-75. There's a river, so we could get that in there. But what this German company did was sent me to live in Germany for 1.5 years to train. It was one of the greatest blessings of my life that I got to go to another country and see how other people live. But one of the things that I noticed there was the dedication to public transport. There's high-speed rail. They have dedicated buses that go not just through the cities, but between cities. Very few people there actually drive. There is car ownership. Most homes have a car, but very few people actually drive themselves. And I know that there's a proposal currently to have high-speed rail coming from Chattanooga to Atlanta. I think we ought to fund that. I think we ought to build that. And I promise you, in towns like Dalton, towns like Chatsworth, Georgia, and towns like Calhoun, you're going to have people like the Senator, Chuck, who could get on that train and go to Atlanta and alleviate some of that traffic. And the byproduct of that is less in traffic here in Pickens County. You're going to have less in traffic in Murray County and Whitfield County. So this study's been ongoing, I think, for about 10 years now, and there have been feasibility studies, there have been financial studies. We know that we can do it with minimal investment. And I know we all hate to say, well, you got to invest something, and where's that money going to come from? But the payback on it would be incredible in terms of getting people off the streets, off the roads. You're eliminating the risk to human life in accidents. You're eliminating the carbon footprint that we all talk about, throwing smog up into the air. So for me, something like that, where you have a high-speed rail and you're investing not just in your infrastructure, but your transportation, that's what we ought to be doing. And I know it's less than 3 minutes, but I mean, for me, that's a pretty clear objective for us.
You're doing just fine, Mr. Moore.
Thank you. You can call me Michael.
Speaking of traffic, you mentioned that you went to Berry.
I did.
I had a speaking engagement in Rome today. I spent 4 hours on the road getting there and back, speaking of traffic.
And that's what it's about.
Of course, I got lost
drive
on the way, but because of construction. This sort of ties in what we were talking about earlier, the traffic, and maybe this would be even worse for the traffic, but it seems like the economic boom in our state is just swamping some areas like Metro Atlanta. To the south, there are areas that are not getting the benefit of an economic boom. Here, Pickens, I think, is sort of in a fringe area, and we would probably welcome some growth, although we sort of like the small town atmosphere as well. But where do you see the economic growth going in our state, and how do you think it might affect this area in the future?
Good question. It just so happens the facility I work for is a raw materials manufacturer for the solar industry, so I'm literally a subject matter expert on the solar industry. I understand green energy, I'm active in the green energy field, and to be honest with you, some of you may have read that in Dalton, we are going to have a solar panel manufacturing facility built up there. That's where our future lies in Georgia. Green energy, whether it's wind energy, solar energy. I want to go ahead and tell you folks, there are 170 some odd thousand people employed right now in the United States of America through solar. It is the single largest energy producing field in the country, more than gas, more than natural gas, more than coal. We have the largest number of employees in the country. And aside from that, so in my particular facility, we have about 720 people that are full-time employed there. The support staff for us is about 12,000 people. That's where those jobs come from, whether it's through service industries, whether it's supplying raw materials that we need, whether it's the companies, the contractors that come on and help us do the jobs that we need to do. So for me, if you want to look toward the future, if you want to look for an economic boost, we in the state of Georgia need to be investing in green energy. Yes, agriculture is our #1 industry here in Georgia, but green energy is the future. Whether we want to admit it or not, oil is going to run out, whether it's 30 years in the future, 50 years in the future, and we need to start looking now, especially in the state of Georgia, because we have the natural resources to pull this off. In Cleveland, Tennessee, all that we need at that facility that we're at is some way to get the stuff there and electricity. Well, we have that in loads here in Northwest Georgia. We just need to have some way to get the raw materials here, and we can start building those facilities here. And I promise you, we contribute nothing bad to the environment. I run one of the laboratories that makes sure of that. And we do not put anything in the air, the water, or in our forests that harm those materials, that environment. That's what we need to be bringing to Georgia.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. Mr. Payne, I mentioned the magic wand. What about your crystal ball as far as it's concerned? economic progress.
Well, I will tell you, I grew up in the Atlanta area. I grew up in Riverdale when I was a kid. Riverdale, Georgia, when I was a little boy, I can remember the city had stopped and had a parade because McDonald's came to town. And so I was there as Riverdale changed throughout the 70s and into the 80s. And I've explained to people, I said, there's an outer band. As Atlanta grows, the outer band moves out. And that outer band continues to move out. Now everybody that I went to high school, I was the third graduating class of Riverdale Senior High School. And now everybody I went to high school with now lives further out. They live in McDonough. They've just continued, nobody lives in Clayton County. And so that band, and I just, honestly, the natural progress it's coming to Pickens. It's here. It really is. I mean, you're right now on the cusp of that outer band that's, where everyone's going to flock to because it's the proximity of this county compared to everything in Atlanta, compared to Chattanooga. I mean, being the proximity to Chattanooga, proximity to the mountains for recreation. I mean, so a lot of this is just natural order of just how things are going, and good things are going to come to Pickens County. I can promise you that. And I've seen it too many times. As far as, I just kind of want to touch back on one of the traffic issues that we have, go back and touch that for a second. One of the biggest things we have with traffic issues is, we Southerners, we like our independence. I told the story a minute ago about, sitting in my car. Well, every day I'm sitting there and I look around and every car has one person in it. Every car has one person in it. And a lot of those people have access to mass transit. But the thing about it is, I know I'm this way. I don't want to get to Atlanta and not be able to go from the capital to this place or wherever. It's that sense of independence that we Southerners have. And so that's always been my concern about a high-speed rail. After the novelty's worn off of it, would people actually use it? Because that's the question I don't think's been answered as far as mass public transportation. But as far as economic growth in Pickens County in the state of Georgia, like I said, I was one of those that worked to cut the state income tax to 5.5% from 6%. We left it open in the law that we have to come back and look at it a second time in 2020 to cut it down to 5%. That's on the table already, but that's in the bill. That's in the law, so we get to come back and look at cutting. And the main reason that is because we are competing with other states. And, and right now, Alabama has a 5% income tax. Tennessee has no income tax. So these states that are around us, we have to compete with. So that's the main why it's really important for the economic development, even here in Pickens County, that we compete nationally. The third thing was the broadband bill, because we are competing in rural Georgia, and if we can I know more and more people working at home and making good money because we're competing on a worldwide market. And if they've got to have that ability to technology to reach out to the world from anywhere in our state, as long as we get that done, I think that'll bring a lot of activity to our state too.
It's time for closing comments. Mr. Payne, 3 minutes for closing comment.
Okay. When I ran 2 years ago, I promised that I would not vote to increase your taxes. And I promised that I would not vote to take local control from local governments. And I have kept my word on both of those issues. I have addressed this as not as a opportunity for me, but honestly just to prove that you can be a good public servant and that there are still good public servants out there. That's been my objective from day one. That's why somebody went here who says, we've seen you so many times, you would think you were from here. As far as I have an A+ rating by the Georgia Chamber of Commerce for votes cast in the 2017-2018 session. I have a 100% rating from the Faith and Freedom Coalition of Georgia on my votes cast. I was also endorsed by the Georgia Life Alliance. I was endorsed by the Georgia Family Policy Alliance of Georgia, which I was the only elected legislator chosen by the Policy Alliance to go as a derivative of focus on the family. And I know many of you know that, but they have a Statesman Academy in Colorado. And they picked me to go to Colorado to serve in the Statesman Academy throughout the summer of last year. And so I am now an alumni of that National Statesman Academy, and I just have a heart for service. I'm always going to have a heart for service and helping people. I've told people, I said, it's 30% BS is this job of being a legislator, and a lot of times, but 70% of it is really just helping, as Rick said. You know, that's my favorite part, and people don't understand that, but you know, your phone rings all the time. And the fact that, you know, I got to help a gentleman who had been waiting 71 years to get his medals from World War II. And he's 91 years old, and his son came to me and said, can you help us? And I went to Congressman Graves' office and said, we got to do this now, because if something happens to that gentleman before he gets his medals, I won't be able to live with myself. And then the day came 2 weeks later, we were going to present the medals to the gentleman, and his family was all there. And I walked in the room, and I just had to turn around and walk back out, because I'm an emotional guy, and I was about to lose it because there was only one medal in a case. Everything else was laid out on the table and labeled for the congressman to know what he was handing him. But there was one in a case, and the man was a Bronze Star recipient from World War II. And I called my wife crying when I left there. I said, I cry a lot. I called my wife, I said, if I don't do anything else good as a state senator, today will be the day that I'll always remember, because today I helped a man who has been waiting 71 years for that Bronze Star to get his Bronze Star, something he certainly earned in World War II. I'm going to just continue to serve and be a good public servant. That's what this is all about, for, you know, and for all of us. And I just ask again for your vote and your consideration on November 6th.
Mr. Morgan, your closing statement.
So tonight we talked about a lot of things that are going great in Georgia. And to be honest with you, there are a lot of good things going on in Georgia. There's a lot of good things going on in this district. But what we do need to do, as I said earlier, we need to hold Senator Payne accountable. And as Lee said, if by some miracle, or grace of God, I were to win this, you should hold me accountable as well. I run this race simply because of Matthew, because there are a lot of Matthews out there. And I learned 7.5 years ago how to love on a completely different level. I have 4 children and one with my wife that she had from a previous marriage. And I've learned to love all 5 of them differently. But Matthew taught me a different level of love. He is just this most incredible person you've ever met. And so I started learning, as I said, about health care and education. And the thing that I learned when we were talking, or when I was learning about this, is that there are people in the state of Georgia, in this district also, who are forgotten. Georgia, for instance, 20% of our low-income families don't have health insurance. That's second in the nation, 20%. So for me, it doesn't make sense that we're not expanding Medicaid. We say, how are we going to pay for that? Well, the government, the federal government pays 100% of that right now. And then I think either next year or 2 years, they'll still continue to pay 80%. But what that does, expanding Medicaid, what that does is it decreases the chance by 84% of rural hospitals closing. You know, in this state, there's 159 counties, 69 of them don't have a pediatrician. If we expanded Medicaid, that would allow some of those counties to have a pediatrician. And see, if I think about Matthew, I have to travel about 15 miles to go to his pediatrician. Some people in rural counties have to travel 60 miles, 75 miles, because they don't have a pediatrician. So I'm running for those Matthews that need health care. I'm running for the Matthews that need their teachers to have better than a $35,000 a year salary. That's the starting salary in the state of Georgia. $55,000 per year is the average salary for teachers in Georgia, which puts us at 23rd. Last year, again, I run a laboratory and I do the hiring for that laboratory. I interviewed a lady. As I was sitting there, she had a master's degree in English. And I said, my God, why are you sitting here? And she said, because the starting salary of one of your chemical operators, which requires a 2-year degree only, is about $20,000 more than what I get paid as a teacher. Folks, we can do better than that. Now, even if you re-elect Senator Payne, we've got to hold him accountable. We've got to hold our legislature accountable for health care, for teacher education, for our children's sake. We have to hold them accountable. And if you elect me, you've got to hold me accountable as well. I'm going to ask for your vote in 3 weeks, and I would appreciate it if you would.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Thank you, Mr. Payne. Thank you, Mr. Shiver. Thank you, Mr. Jasperse. Thank you, Mr. Gooch, for coming tonight. Thank all of y'all for coming tonight. And like I said earlier, I'm sure the candidates would be glad to hang around for a few minutes to listen to your comments, your questions, shake your hand, and maybe even kiss a baby if you brought one. Good night. Thank all for coming.